Good afternoon. Bonjour, Cannes. Very good to be here. Thank you for inviting me, especially since I'm English. I'd like to start with a question, something just to get you thinking. What do you think the following things may have in common? Post-it notes, choc chip cookies, tea bags, microwave ovens, lollipops. You getting hungry yet? Penicillin and Teflon. I won't ask you to shout the answers, but some of you may or may not know this, but all of those innovations were accidents. Nobody actually went out of their way to create any of those products. They were trying to build or make something else, and they accidentally ended up with what they ended up with. And in some cases, that's very good news. If you're a fan of choc chip cookies, it's great news. And you find sometimes that accidental innovation or unintended innovation also happens in the social innovation world. People come up with solutions to problems by chance and accidentally. I'll give you three examples, quick examples. This is Eric Hersman, a friend of mine. Eric's a Kenyan blogger. Eric and his friends were going about their everyday business, blogging, writing, doing technology work around the world, about 5 of them, and suddenly this happened in 2008, the Kenyan election crisis. The presidential elections turned nasty. People started getting killed. There was violence across the country. It surprised everybody, and it surprised Eric and his friends. They were also very surprised and shocked and disturbed that most of the news they were getting was not coming from the rural areas. It was just coming from Nairobi and Mombasa and the usual high population areas. So in 3 days, they built a map. They called it Ushahidi, which is witness in Swahili. And people could post and send an email and do a tweet and a text message, what was happening where they lived, and it could be mapped visually here, so they could capture everything that was going on in the country, so that when peace came and it was all over, they could use the map to work out really what had happened where. Today, Ushahidi is used in 130 countries. It drives all manner of projects, and it was used during the Haiti earthquake as the main central point of coordination. They had no money, no plan, no permission, and no qualifications to do what they did. They did it as a reaction to something that they saw and didn't like. This is Bridge Kathari, another friend of mine. Bridge was eating pizza and drinking beer one Saturday night in his friend's apartment in New York. They were watching women on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I've never seen the film, but apparently it's a good film. But it's a Spanish film, and they were learning Spanish at the time. And during a break, Bridge casually mentioned, wouldn't it be great if we could read the Spanish as we listened to the Spanish? It might help with our Spanish learning. Of course, subtitles usually translate into a different language, not do the same language. So Bridge casually mentioned that, and he thought, what if Bollywood put Hindi on all the films and music videos? Would children learn to read in India? So he came up with a concept called same language subtitling. Today, 300 million Indian school children get their first taste of literacy by watching same language subtitles on television. That's an amazing number, especially when you think, again, he had no money, no qualifications, no permission, no 5-year plan. He just had this idea and he stuck to it, and it's had a very, very major impact in his home country. Last example, this is Laura Stachel. She's a maternal nurse in the US, goes about her usual business at home, helping mothers give birth to their children. She went to Nigeria for a while to do some other work, and one night she was on a maternity ward, and she saw this. Now, this is the main nurses' station in a maternity ward in a Nigerian hospital. Around this desk are about 30 women with their babies in the beds, and you can't see them because there's a power cut. Now, it's not necessarily a disaster here. The nurse can go around with the lamp, but if mother has walked in after maybe a day or two, walking in maybe dozens of miles to get to the hospital, she's in pain, she's having difficulty, or they're in the middle of an operation while the mother is having a difficult pregnancy, and the power goes, it can mean life or death. Literally, women and babies were dying in front of Laura's eyes because there was no light. It's one of the most simple things to fix, and it annoyed, frustrated, angered, and upset her. So when she got home, her and her partner built this. It's a solar suitcase. It's got batteries inside. You can plug in phones to charge phones and walkie-talkies. And you put it out in the day. It all charges up wonderfully. Then you bring it in at night, And if you need to do an operation at night, the power goes, there's an emergency, you can provide light. Today, in about 130 countries as well, Laura's innovation is helping women give birth safely, all because she's provided them light. Again, Laura had no money, no plan, no permission, no qualifications to do this. She saw something which deeply troubled her, and she wanted to take action, and so she did. And this is important because the international development sector, the professionals out there with all the government money, all the bigger, well, not all, maybe a majority of the bigger, larger organizations that have the plan, they have the money, they have the permission, they have the qualifications, seem to be failing in many cases to solve the problems that people eating pizza are solving. And I think that's actually very interesting. Maybe the future of problem solving is in this room. Maybe it's us. Maybe it's not a professional sector which just goes around spending $3 trillion over 60 years, which is a vast amount of money. I'm sure you'd agree. The world I live in, the development sector, the technology side I work in, is obsessed with the latest, the greatest, the fastest. It's all about the latest thing that's come off the production line and how that can be used to make the world a better place. It's basically things that come from the holy mecca of technology, the Apple Store, the place where people just get very excited and don't always know why. And they spend lots of money and they still feel good about spending lots of money on things they never knew they actually needed. And we get this too in the social innovation space. Here's an example of somebody about 2 years ago talking about how farmers in Africa can use iPads to learn about agriculture. Now, most poor African farmers earn about $2 a day. It's a lot of years to save up for an iPad. However great the technology may be, however many amazing things an iPad could do, the farmer is just not going to be able to afford an iPad. So it seems a bit like a pointless exercise. And when we end up with technology that we can use without necessarily always having to really make it work in the real world, we start to build things just because we can. And when we build things just because we can, we end up building things that are just silly. Here's one example from a year ago in an office in London. It's an iPad-powered coffee machine. Why do we need an iPad-powered coffee machine? What's so special about this? It doesn't need to exist. The world is not better because this exists. And people build smartphone apps for healthcare workers across the developing world. They build farmer apps. They build apps for human rights activists. But most of them actually are using phones like this. Many of the poorest people who are in most need are using the phones that we used 5, 10, 15 years ago. They don't do all the smart things that we want them to do. The irony is that often the most profound, useful, impactful technologies are the simple ones, the really, really simple ones, not the really complex stuff. And we need to remember that, I think, when we're trying to build solutions to make the world a better place. The world is not like where we are from in many of our cases. My experience of the technology and innovation world goes back to the development of this software called Frontline SMS in 2005. My work in Africa had previously gone back to 1993, where I'd spent a lot of time helping build schools and hospitals, running primate sanctuaries, trying to understand what the world is like for many of the people who live on it and who are less fortunate than me. Frontline SMS is being used in Nigeria to monitor elections by grassroots organizations, not by people like me, but local Nigerian organizations. In Zimbabwe, to allow people to report human rights abuses carried out by quite a nasty government, if we're honest. In East Africa, to report where drugs are out of stock, so babies don't need to die of diarrhea because they can't get the medication that they need. Again, a very simple solution, but it's not always available. Security alerts in Afghanistan to help people who are braving, they're putting their lives at risk to make the country better and rebuild the country, who are clearly working in very dangerous conditions. Human trafficking projects in Vietnam, Haiti, Malawi, and so on. And in Malawi, as rural hospitals are using it to send messages to community healthcare workers to allow them to get test results by text message, to arrange appointments with patients, basically to streamline what their hospital can do, to make the best of very, very limited resources. Frontline SMS today is used in about 170 countries 20 to 30 million people are benefiting from its use. And this ties in with the stories of the other people, because when I built that software in 2005, I had no money, no plan, no permission, and no qualifications either. But I saw a problem which I felt very strongly needed to be solved, and I didn't think anybody else was going to fix it if I didn't fix it. And that's the message, I think, for the room today, for here, that there's often something always niggling us at the back of our minds. We will see things on the news, we will see things on television, we will read about things in other parts of the world where people are far less fortunate. We feel maybe guilt, we feel upset, we feel anger, and sometimes we feel there's nothing that we can really do. But there is. Everybody in this room can make a difference in the world. They can make a difference to one or two other people, and if everybody simply made a difference to one or two other people, then the world would be much better. We don't have to be building things that help millions and millions of people. That can happen, but that's very, very unusual. Of course, Eric just went out there and built his system. He just went out and did it. Bridge, he had the idea. He went out and did it. Laura, she saw mothers dying and babies dying. She went out and did it. And this Ugandan who wanted to build himself a helicopter, he did it. And these Nigerian school children who had no light in their school, who had to build, or ended up building a urine-powered generator to give light, they did it. This Ugandan who needed to find a way of powering his mobile phone so that he could charge it up as he was cycling around, he did it. And this young Kenyan kid who's looking after his cattle for his family, which were being repeatedly attacked by lions, built a detection system. This 8-year-old boy built a detection system to tell him when lions were approaching his cattle so he could intervene and try and save them. He did it. So the message for you in the room, you might not have a plan, you might not have permission, you might not have money, but you can make a difference in the world. Thank you very much.